Hello everyone, this is Kelly and I'd like to welcome you back to the Honeybee Stamps YouTube channel and day 2 of sneak peeks for our Simply Spring release. So we're starting today with some beautiful florals and this is called the Daisy Layers Bouquet. I love daisies. I think daisies are so happy and they scream springtime. And this stamp and die set makes it easy to layer and add dimension with this beautiful daisy layer bouquet. There's also some great sentiments in this set and great fonts like "You Make My Day Brighter." Moments like these should be celebrated. You're in my thoughts and you're simply the best. Now here's a look at that large coordinating die set. You can see where it's going to cut out the large layers for the bouquet. So you can add some foam dots behind those to add dimension. And then there's also the great dies that are going to cut out all those beautiful sentiments. Now another cool feature are the layering stencils. So this is going to make it super easy if you're like me and you like the help of stencils to color in your stamped images. I am just going to love these. So there's all the layers, there's the etched lines in the stencil, so it's easy to line up, and we're going to get the most beautiful layered daisy bouquet. Now here's a beautiful bouquet card from design team member Becky. You can see where she has created a multicolor daisy bouquet and added "You're Simply the Best." Now this sentiment set I love is called "This One's for the Girls." And let me tell you, this stamp set will cover every girl in your life. We have Happy Mother's Day, and with love for Mother's Day, but there's mom, mother, mama, mum, stepmom, bonus mom, sister, aunt, tia, abuela, Mimi, sister-in-law, I love you so much, great grandma, daughter-in-law, aunt. There's a lot. And so you can see here how we can just create the most perfect cards depending on each girl in your life. Now, one of the things that I love about all the names that are listed, godmother, grandmother, and so on, is you can simply mix that with a happy birthday sentiment and you've got a totally different card, and you can add and personalize each card with all of those names. So here is how design team member Leanne has used that "With Love" on Mother's Day for a special aunt. I am in love with that. Next is our big time kindness sentiment set, and these are big time sentiments. They are large and will take up a lot of real estate on your cards. They're sure to be beautiful on your florals and on your stenciled backgrounds. We have "Hello Friend," "Hey Girl," "Kindness," "Oh Happy Day," "Sweet Friend," "Our Friendship," and "You're Amazing." And with a lot of our Honeybee Stamps sentiment sets, there are mix and match greetings that are going to go along with each one. The die set includes a die that's going to cut out all of those big time greetings. Now let's look at these on a card, and I love the way that Bobby has used this on that layering daisy stamp set. You can see she's used "Oh Happy Day," and I think that's perfect to go along with those beautiful daisies. Next is our spring wreath stamp and die set. So this stamp set is going to create a beautiful spring wreath, and I love that there is the wreath itself, and then there's all kinds of extra loose pieces that you can either do a background with just the small images, you can just do the wreath, or you can add those little smaller images, the die cuts on top of your wreath to add dimension. Now the die set will cut out around the outside of the wreath, on the inside of the wreath, and then also all of those little extra floral pieces so you can pop those up on top of your spring wreath. Now I'm going to create a card with this set at the end of the video, so I hope you'll stick around for that. Next is the adorable Spring Meadow collection. Now this is so cute and so sweet. There are little florals there towards the bottom. They're very whimsical, and there's also little critters to go into our little garden or our little meadow. There's a snail and butterfly and bees, of course. There's a dragonfly and a grasshopper, and there's a lot of sweet little sentiments. There's also a layering stencil set. Now these are all etched, so they're easy to line up. And these stencils are going to color every image from the Spring Meadow stamp set. So I'm going to try to hold these up. They're kind of hard to catch in the light, but you can see like the wings on the dragonfly, the little back to the snail. There's also all the little pieces for the flowers and the greenery. We have the last one here that's going to get all the little detail pieces in, like the centers of the flowers. Now there's also the Spring Meadow die set. That's going to cut out all of the images plus the sentiments, so you can create a layered meadow or a layered little garden, cut out your sentiment and add that onto your card. Now there's also the Love Bug hot foil plate and die. So very cute. And I think it's amazing because this little hot foil plate plus the Spring Meadow collection were designed to kind of go together if you wanted them to. So I'm going to show you a graphic of how you can put these two together. So you can hot foil the Hey There Love Bug and then build your stamped images around that. Here's a little graphic of some of those items put together. You see the hot foiled Hey There Love Bug and then the florals and some butterflies kind of swirling about. And then here's a card where Leanne has used the stencils and some markers and the dies, and she's made a layered meadow, and you can see all of her critters there with the thinking of you sentiment. Next are our layering folk art stencils. I had the joy of playing with these during one of our sneak peek live streams, and this was so fun to blend ink on top of these and make a beautiful spring card. You can see the design kind of peeking through the stencils there, but we have the large flowers, and then we have the leaf design, and then last but not least, we have the stems, and all these layered together to make the most beautiful folk art design. You can see all the little flowers there, some little roses or little peonies on the edge, and then the large daisies in the center. And here is the card that I created during that live stream. You can see all the beautiful layers of the folk art stencils, and then I added one of the big time kindness sentiments to the center. Now next is another layering stencil set, and this is called the Daisy Lattice Stencils. So again, we're going to have multiple layers here. Look at the sweet little daisies and the little bunches of flowers. There's the center of the flowers, and then there's the little leaves and things. So let's stack these up and see the whole design here. I'm going to hold them up so we can kind of get a glance at it. See all the little leaves and the bunches in the background. Now this is what it looks like when there's different colored inks added onto the paper. And then I love this beautiful card from design team member Becky. She's used those stencils to create a beautiful background. She's used that big time kindness sentiment set and then some of our new spring greenery dies. Next, we have the Delicate Daisy cover plates. There's a bottom plate that's going to add a lot of texture and some little holes in the center of those little daisies. And then there is a top plate that's going to add kind of that lattice design onto the top. I'm going to take off this top plate. I'm going to kind of add the two together so we can see what they would look like stacked on top of one another. So these are great to use on their own, or you can layer them like this to create a whole new design. Now here's a card from design team member Becky where she's used both of those cover plates. You can see the subtle pierced background and then also that lattice daisy in the forefront there, that top die, and they're all A2 size. Now next up we have a beautiful embossing folder, and I love this. This embossing folder is called Daisy Fields. It's a 3D embossing folder, so you're going to get lots of texture. You can see the raised areas there and then the lowered areas on the other side. And I have run a sheet of white cardstock through my die machine with this 3D embossing folder to show you how beautiful that is. Look at that. There's so many different techniques that you can do with 3D embossing folders, and I think these are absolutely beautiful. Next, we have our spring vine layering frames. This is a large, wonderful die set. I love to layer cardstock, and so this is perfect for me. Look at all the texture and those dies that are going to emboss and press into your paper. There are different frames. You can see the little leaves that cut in the side. There's a little green leafy wreath in the center. There are kind of label shaped dies that are a great resting place for your florals and things like that. Here I've used the spring vine frames as the background for my garden gate card. You can see it all back there. So fun. And if you love to layer paper, this is going to be a beautiful one for spring and summer. Now, next up are our bud vase dies. These are so cute. We have 5 little vases that nestle into this cute little basket. So it's like a wire basket. It has a little wooden insert, and then you can pop in the little bud vases. Fill these with your florals, fill them with the spring greenery dies. Now here's a look at how those little bud vases fit into that cute little wire basket. You can mix and match these in the base, or you can use them on their own to fill with greenery. Here Bobby has created a sweet little card using our new spring greenery dies, and I love all the color, and look at those little vases all lined up there. Next is our Lovely Layers Cherry Blossom. So this creates the most beautiful stem full of leaves and cherry blossoms. Now here's a look at the layering guide for this set, so you can see how beautiful that is when it's all layered and put together. Now here's a card by design team member Leanne where she uses the cherry blossom die set. Look at that with that Happy Mother's Day. It's so beautiful. And then we also have the Lovely Layers Dogwood set. The Lovely Layers Dogwood set is just a little bit larger than the cherry blossoms. You get the large stem, lots of leaves, the petals, and the centers to the flowers. Here is the layering guide to give you a look at what those look like when they're all layered together. And here's a card that I created during one of our live streams using that Lovely Layers Dogwood Blossom set, and then a new 3D embossing folder that has dogwood blossoms as well. So here are the cherry blossoms and then the dogwood all together so you can get a look at both of those. And then I want to show you that amazing 3D embossing folder that was used on the last card. So this is called Dogwood Bloom 3D embossing folder. So this is going to give you so much beautiful texture. You can see the raised portions on one side of the embossing folder and then the deep or inset portions on the other side. So fun and so beautiful. Now I have embossed just a white sheet of cardstock so you can see all the beautiful details that's left in the paper when that embosses and you use that in your die machine. Next is the Lovely Layers Spring Greenery. So this is a great staple for all of your spring and summer cards. And if you love any of our Lovely Layers florals, this is going to be a great addition just to add extra greenery into your bouquets. But there's lots of different leaves, different leaf shapes and sizes. Some you can put the little heads or the little buds on top of, like a little baby's breath or something like that. Here's a look at those dies when they are all put together. And I love the next card from design team member Bobby. She has mixed the spring seeds stamp and coordinating die set, and she's tucked in all in behind there all types of her spring greenery dies just to add a little texture and fun to the background. Now let's create a card with some of today's products. So I have some watercolor paper, gold embossing powder, the spring wreath stamp and die set, this one's for the girl stamp and die set. And I'm going to start out by taking that large spring wreath and inserting it on top of my watercolor paper on the Misty. And so I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to use anti-static powder and go over that watercolor paper really, really well because I'm using the textured side of my watercolor paper. I'm going to ink that up with embossing ink, and then I want to go over that several times really well. and press really well with our pressure tool. This ensures that that textured watercolor paper gets a really good impression with that sticky embossing ink. Next, I'm going to cover the paper with the Brutus Monroe Gilded Embossing Powder. This is a really beautiful gold, and I'm just going to tap off the excess and make sure I don't have a mess on my watercolor paper, and then I'm going to move on to heat set that embossing powder. I'm going to make sure that I heat that up really well with the heat tool to get into all those little nooks and crannies of the textured watercolor paper. And once that is nice and smooth, I can kind of set it aside and let it dry while I'm choosing some regular distress ink colors. I have 5 kind of springy colors picked out, 2 greens, a light green and a dark green, and then a couple of pinks and a really light purple. So I just have a jar full of water there, and we're going to do some really super simple basic watercolor. I'm just going to pick up the distress ink with my wet brush and then just spread it into the open areas of the leaves and the petals. Now, the nice thing about having this heat embossed with a gold embossing powder is that embossing powder creates a little ridge. It's going to hold in all of that water, so I can just kind of move it around inside, and it acts as a little barrier so I don't have a lot of bleeding outside of the lines. So I'm just going to work my way around the wreath, and with this lighter color, I'm just getting a good base all over color, and then I can go in with a darker color to add just a little bit of shading to the base of each leaf. Once I'll have all the light and the dark done on all the little leaves, I can go in and start working on the little blossoms. So for the little bitty flowers that are in the wreath, I'm adding that really light lavender purple. And so again, I'm just spreading on the color, getting an all over color, and then I can go in later with the same color and kind of build up the pigment and add darker areas towards the base of each petal. Now it's really hard to see on my glass mat, but I am smushing down a very pale pink. It's spun sugar, and I'm going to again do an all over base color of spun sugar into the large flower petals. So I'm going to go in all over with that, just with a wet brush. And then after I get these nice and dry, I can go in with a little bit darker pink and add just a little bit of shading where I want it on each of the large florals. One thing I was sure to do between layers of color, especially on those large flowers, was to very lightly try to dry and set the colors. That way I didn't have a lot of bleeding. And then when I go in to add the darker shades, it stands out a little bit more. So this is worn lipstick, I believe, and I'm going to get that pretty wet. I don't want it just really dark. And I'm going to add that just to the base of each little petal, just to add a little bit of dimension in those larger flowers. Next, I can do the centers of the little lavender flowers with a really bright yellow. That really stands out. I love yellow and purple together. And then once I have that done, we're pretty much all finished with the watercolor. I'm going to make sure that this dries really well. I don't want to try to tape it down or tape down the dies and die cut it with the paper being wet, because I don't want to take the chance of my pretty spring wreath tearing when we die cut it. So after taking my heat tool and making sure all that ink and water were nicely dry, I can line up the outer portion of the wreath, the die, and I can line it up, and then I'm going to tape it down with a little bit of highlighter tape. Now there is a die for the inner portion of the wreath as well, and so I'm going to flip it over and spin it until it lines up, get it all set in there where I need it to be, and then I'm going to tape that down with the highlighter tape as well. And I can run the whole thing through my die machine, and then it cuts the outside of the wreath and then the inside, as you see there on the left. Now I'm going to make a large 5x7 card. I normally don't make cards this big, but I wanted to add some of our new pattern papers and things and a sentiment. And so we're going to do a 5x7 card today. I've chosen some of the darker pink pattern paper from the Pinstripes and Polka Dots. that's going to match the florals in my card. Now I laid that on where I'm going to set it or glue it down onto the front of my card base. I set my wreath where I want it to go and then lined up my sentiment and then took everything away so I could stamp the sentiment, and it says, "I love you so much." And that's going to be rested there right underneath the wreath. And then once I get that with the green ink as dark as I want it, I can stamp my Happy Mother's Day. I'm going to do it in the same green and in the same way on just a white scrap piece of paper, and I can die cut the Happy Mother's Day. Now, once I dry my Distress Oxide ink, because that stays wet a little bit longer, I can use the coordinating Happy Mother's Day die to cut this out. So I'm going to tape it down with the same highlighter tape to make sure it doesn't shift as I run this through my die machine. And I'm going to pull out my little bitty buzz cutter to cut out this cute little sentiment. Now, once I run that through my little bitty buzz cutter, I can pop out the die and carefully remove the highlighter tape and all of the little insides of the letters. And then that Happy Mother's Day, that beautiful scripty font, is all ready to go onto my card. Now, I have been saving this vintage trim or this vintage lace that I found at a vintage market. And I thought a Mother's Day card would be the perfect place to kind of stretch across what the layer, this vintage trim. And so I'm going to line it up and fold it over. And I think it's perfect that the vintage trim has little flowers in it, so it kind of goes with the spring wreath design. Now I'm using the tape runner on the back to hold everything into place. It's going to hold down that vintage trim, and then it's also going to hold my pattern paper down onto the front of my card base. And so I can just line it up and press it into place, and you can see how now my sentiment is there rested right above my little paper panel and my vintage trim. I rounded the bottom corners of my card base, and now it's time to add my watercolored spring wreath. So I'm going to pop this up to give it a little bit of dimension, and I'm using our Honeybee Stamps tabbed foam dots. I love these because they have the little tabs on them, and it makes it easier for my chubby fingers to grab a hold of those little tabs. I'm going to flip it over and arrange it on my card. I just love all the glimmer and shimmer from that gold embossing powder, and I can tap that into place. And now I'm ready to add the Happy Mother's Day. So I'm going to use a narrow foam strip. Again, this is going to add just a little bit of dimension. I can place that on the back of that sentiment die cut and tear it, and then I can remove the backer. And then we can place that directly onto our wreath. Now the last thing to do is add a few just basic champagne colored pearls. These pearls are from our warm pearl set, and that just adds a little bit of shimmer and sparkle, and I love how that champagne color just goes in with the gold embossing powder and the beautiful colors of the wreath. Now that is all for day 2 of sneak peeks of our Simply Spring release. All these products will be available at honeybeestamps.com on March the 15th. Thank you so much for joining me with all the sneak peeks, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.